All right, what's going on, you guys? Welcome once again to Dr. J Football and Finance. Today, I'm going to treat myself talking about something really interesting and important for all those Madridistas out there. I'm so sorry, guys, because this is going to be a very Los Blancos video, right? Because I'm going to talk about the potential signing of Erling Haaland for Real Madrid. As you may or may not know, Erling Haaland has been, or the name of Erling Haaland has been around the Real Madrid fans for a while, right? The Manchester City player, of course, with all due respect, is doing great in the World Cup this year. And once again, all the rumors are going through the roof in regards to the possibility for the Norwegian player to sign for Real Madrid, which in my opinion is not going to be possible this year. But let me tell you something, maybe in the near future, at least in the foreseeable future. And in order for me to confirm this scenario might happen, let me tell you, one of the most famous and important journalists in Spain, José Félix Díaz, had an interview with the president of Borussia Dortmund, Joaquim Vázquez, back in February, and they were talking about the potential signing of Erling Haaland for Real Madrid, and they didn't even argue about the possibility for him to say yes or no. It was more when. Okay, so in my opinion, sooner or later we are going to see the blondie tall player playing for Real Madrid. I'm so sorry if you are a Manchester City fan, but this is something apparently is going to happen, not in the foreseeable future, but maybe next year or the following year. Okay, so in order for me to explain all the numbers that might add up in order for Real Madrid to sign the player, let me walk you through these numbers and how Real Madrid could fit this player right away in the books. Because as you can imagine, Erling Haaland is not any other player like average normal player, is actually the player, the number 9 we're looking for. So let's get into it. So first thing we got to keep in mind is that in January 2025, Erling Haaland extended his contract with Manchester City, as you know, until 2034, which is a long contract. But as Rafaela Pimienta has stated many times, her players are always in a position where they can leave, get out of every single club they don't want to be or play at anymore, and sign for the club they want to play in. So the most important thing is that the former agency of Mino Raiola has always been very strict in this matter, which is try to free up the player right away, just in case they want to change, they want to move out, they want to play for another club or whatever. So Erling Haaland has allegedly a so-called release clause that would allow him to play for Real Madrid if he wants. So that's the number one thing we have to keep in mind. Although he's happy at Manchester City and he might play all the way until 2034, what can happen and what I actually will think will happen is that he will move out way earlier than that to Real Madrid. However, that wouldn't be for free. As you can imagine, Real Madrid would have to pay at some point some number or some figure in the vicinity of the 150 million all the way to 200 million. I'm going to tell you something about the details of this hidden clause, which is something like, okay, this is going to be the price, the asking price for this year, but the number will decrease as we move forward, which means that it might be 150 2026, but then 120 in 2027, 110 2028, and so on. It might be 200 now and then 150 next year. That is something we don't know, and I cannot assure is this way or the other way because I don't know the details, but it's something they have just confirmed to me. Okay, it's kind of like a decreasing release clause for the team that really want to sign Erling Haaland. And by the way, this release clause is not for any other Premier League team, because what they don't want to happen is to sell the player to any other direct rival or whatever. But aside of that number, what you have to add up to that deal, to that contract that might happen with Real Madrid, is the fees of, or the commission fees for Rafaela Pimienta and then the father of Erling Haaland and all the people involved in the deal, which might add up a total number of 250 or 250. I am taking actually 200 because, in my opinion, since a accounting standpoint, what you gotta do is to pick the worst scenario possible, the most damaging or the most unfavorable scenario for you, and say, okay, this is going to happen. And then if you come across a most favorable scenario, great. But if you don't, you still have done the numbers. If they add up and make sense, fine. If they don't, you quit, you get away, that's it. But taking the number 200 million, we have to add up 40 to 50 million in commissions and other fees. So Rafaela Pimienta and the agency, and then the father and other people we don't even know the names. So that'd be a total of 250 million euros. But now let's go ahead with the most spicy part of this signing, the amortization cost, which is very important as any other number in the world, as any other number you are going to put on the table to sign any player. The amortization cost is directly related to the length of the contract. And say, for example, Florentino Perez signs to Erling Haaland with a 5-year contract next year, or this year, but next year, let's say 2027, all the way until 2032, a 5 ideal year contract, okay? So if you divide the 250 divided by the 5-year length contract, the amortization cost would be 50 million euros a year. Only the amortization cost, without including the gross salary he might have in Real Madrid, which would be the total amount Real Madrid will have to pay just to keep the Norwegian player in the books. So say, for example, that in the best case scenario, I should pick the worst, but let's say, or let's be a little bit more optimistic. Let's say Real Madrid has the best scenario possible, and we can write off these commission fees for the agents and people and father and all that as a operating expenses. So you don't have to pay any tax for that stuff. So you can divide or split the value all throughout the length of the contract, which is 5 years. Then the baseline for the amortization cost would go down all the way to 40 million. It's not great, but at least it's something and more in a big signing like Erling Haaland, which is very expensive. And he actually amassed, I think it's around the 30 million after taxes a year in the Premier League team, which is something we don't even have in Real Madrid. Even Vinicius Jr. or Kylian Mbappe are way lower than that, way lower. So here we go with the section 3 and see how Haaland would fit in the books of Real Madrid. As I have said 5 minutes ago, right now Erling Haaland is making around 30 million a year, which is about 500,000 pounds a year, right? The first thing I gotta say, this is not going to happen in Florentino's watch. But if so, then we will have, for the first time in history, the highest paid football player in Real Madrid. We never ever had that type of player, because I have said Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. are the ones who are making the most, and it's not even close to that. They are making around 15 million after taxes. So imagine how far it would be. But if so, I mean, if this thing can happen in Real Madrid and Erling Haaland comes up making around 30 million a year or something like that, you guys have to keep in mind, for Real Madrid will be on the books 60 million yearly deal, because we have to pay to the social security and then taxes and stuff like that. A 60 million deal only in the salary of the guy, and then if you add up the 40 million amortization cost, would be around, or would be in the border of the 100 million a year, just to keep Erling Haaland as a Real Madrid player in the books and off the books. So that'd be an insane amount of money. It's true Real Madrid is making a lot of money these days, but man, when it comes to signing players and salaries and stuff like that, it's absolutely crazy. So now that we are on the verge of the end of the video, the total package for signing Haaland and keeping him here in Real Madrid that would be a total of 500 million deal, which would be absolutely a record fee, a record transfer, a record signing in all our history. The Operation Haaland would be 500 million euros for the 5-year ideally contract that he would have if he signs for Real Madrid. But it's not only Erling Haaland. You guys have to keep in mind, if we keep into the box and off the box to players like Vinicius Jr., Mbappe, Jude Bellingham, or Bernardo Silva, that'd be even more, even beyond that. So the total bill of just salaries and wages in Real Madrid with only these players would be around 160 million a year, which is crazy because we would be getting closer to the threshold of the 70%. I mean, not the 70, but kind of like that. Right now we are on the 43% cost ratio salary with the players, right? With the budget. So what happens is that we would go up maybe 50 or even 60%, which is 10% lower than the limit that UEFA is marking for every single team. As you know, Chelsea overpassed this number. They went all the way up to 76, and that's why they got a ticket or they got a fine. They were fined by the UEFA regulations, and Real Madrid don't want to be that close or even pass it. Okay, so that would be a total bill of 160 million a year, which is absolutely insane. Only two things can change this kind of scenario, which is number one, if we are able to sell Vinicius Jr. As you know, he hasn't renewed his contract, and what can happen is that Real Madrid, if he put him into the market, there would be another time of like Saudi Arabian team or any other Premier League team who might sign the player for around, say, for example, 200 million or something like that. Of course, that would be not only the amount of money you can get from this player, but as well all the space you are freeing up just because you are getting rid of one of the best players of Real Madrid or the highest paid players in Real Madrid, number one. And number two, the image rights. As you know, we only conceded to Kylian Mbappe the 80% of the image rights just because it was a requirement for him, and we decided to let it go with that or get away with it. But in the case of Erling Haaland, we should be more careful and say, okay, no, it's got to be 50%, that's it. If we are able to pull that off, then I would say everything will be fine. But even with that, man, we got to be very careful because salaries and expenses and wages and stuff like that are going through the roof. And we got to be very extremely careful because all this time we've done it this way. And of course, we got to be careful to not overpass the regulations and get a fine like Chelsea or something like that. So I hope you guys liked this video and understood pretty much everything. Just leave the comments in the comment section below, whatever you guys think about this thing, about Erling Haaland going to Real Madrid, staying in Manchester, whatever. Hope you guys like the video. Once again, subscribe, hit the thumbs up, and of course, see you in the next one.